Most people think sleeping less is one of the worst things you can do for your body. Every health expert seems to repeat the same advice. Get 8 hours of sleep every night, or your brain suffers, your heart suffers, your immune system weakens, and your life gets shorter. It sounds simple. More sleep equals better health. Less sleep equals disaster. But here's something almost nobody tells you. Your body wasn't designed to sleep the exact same amount every single night. In fact, there are situations where sleeping less can actually improve your focus, increase your productivity, sharpen your brain, and even help regulate your body's internal clock. The key isn't simply sleeping less. It's understanding when less sleep becomes beneficial and when it becomes dangerous. Because surprisingly, some of the world's highest performing people don't naturally sleep 8 hours. Some consistently function on 7. Others average 6.5. A small percentage even thrive on less without experiencing the problems most people would expect. So how is that possible? To understand why less sleep can sometimes be good for you, you first need to understand what sleep is actually doing. Most people think sleep is simply your brain shutting down for the night. It isn't. Your brain is actually incredibly active while you're asleep. Throughout the night, it cycles through several different stages, each serving a completely different purpose. During deep sleep, your body repairs muscles, releases growth hormone, strengthens your immune system, and restores energy. During REM sleep, your brain organizes memories, processes emotions, strengthens learning, and builds new neural connections. It's less like turning your computer off and more like installing software updates while nobody is using it. But here's where things get interesting. Those updates don't happen at a constant rate. The majority of deep sleep occurs during the first few sleep cycles of the night. That's when your body prioritizes physical recovery above everything else. As morning approaches, deep sleep becomes shorter, while REM sleep becomes longer. Your brain gradually shifts away from repairing the body and focuses more on processing information and preparing you for the next day. In other words, every hour of sleep isn't equally valuable. The first few hours perform very different jobs than the last few, and that helps explain something researchers have noticed for decades. Some people naturally wake up before 8 hours feeling completely refreshed. Others can sleep for 9 or even 10 hours and still feel exhausted. The difference often isn't just how long they slept, it's how efficiently they moved through those sleep stages. Which brings us to one of the biggest myths about sleep: the idea that everyone needs exactly 8 hours. That number didn't come from a biological law, it's simply an average. Large studies have shown that healthy adults typically need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, not exactly 8. Genetics, age, activity level, stress, and even your internal body clock can all change where you fall within that range. For some people, forcing themselves to stay in bed longer than their body actually needs doesn't improve recovery at all. It simply means spending more time lying awake, drifting in and out of light sleep, or waking up feeling groggy because they interrupted the wrong part of their sleep cycle. So if sleeping longer isn't always better, why has 8 hours become the golden rule? Because while too little sleep is unquestionably dangerous, scientists have discovered that too much sleep can also carry its own risks. And that's where the story becomes much more complicated. But here's where the research takes an unexpected turn. Scientists didn't just discover that too little sleep is harmful. They also found that consistently sleeping too much can be associated with many of the very same health problems. Large population studies have repeatedly shown that people who regularly sleep 9 or 10 hours every night often have higher rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, obesity, cognitive decline, and even a shorter lifespan. At first glance, that sounds impossible. How could getting more rest be linked to worse health? The answer is that sleep itself usually isn't the problem. It's often a symptom. People with chronic illnesses, inflammatory diseases, untreated sleep disorders, or depression frequently need more sleep because their bodies are constantly trying to recover. In other words, longer sleep doesn't necessarily cause poor health. Instead, poor health often causes longer sleep. But that distinction led researchers to ask an even bigger question. If sleeping longer isn't automatically healthier, is it possible that sleeping slightly less could actually provide benefits for some people? The answer, surprisingly, is yes. One of the biggest benefits comes from something called sleep efficiency. Sleep efficiency measures how much of the time you spend in bed is actually spent asleep. Imagine two people. One lies in bed for 9 hours but spends over an hour tossing and turning before falling asleep and wakes up several times throughout the night. The other sleeps solidly for just 7 hours without interruption. Despite getting fewer total hours, the second person often experiences higher quality sleep because their brain spends more time in the restorative stages instead of repeatedly restarting the sleep cycle. That's why many sleep specialists don't tell patients to spend more time in bed. In fact, they sometimes recommend the exact opposite. One of the most effective treatments for chronic insomnia is called sleep restriction therapy. At first, the name sounds completely backwards. Instead of allowing insomnia patients to spend extra hours lying awake in bed, doctors intentionally limit how long they're allowed to sleep. Someone who normally spends 9 hours in bed but only sleeps 6 might be instructed to stay in bed for just 6.5 hours. It sounds almost cruel, yet over time something remarkable happens. Because the brain begins associating the bed only with sleep instead of frustration, sleep becomes deeper, faster, and far more efficient. Patients often fall asleep sooner, wake up less during the night, and eventually achieve more restorative sleep despite spending fewer hours in bed. In other words, for certain people, less sleep doesn't actually mean less recovery. It means wasting less time lying awake. And this reveals one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding sleep. Your body doesn't simply reward you for spending more hours under a blanket. It rewards you for getting high-quality sleep at the right time, which Which raises an even more interesting question. If quality matters more than quantity in many situations, what happens when your body naturally wants less sleep in the first place? Now here's where the story becomes even stranger. Scientists have discovered that some people don't just tolerate less sleep, they are genetically programmed to need less of it. In 2009, researchers identified a rare mutation in a gene known as DEC2. People carrying this mutation naturally sleep around 6 hours each night while showing none of the typical symptoms of sleep deprivation. They wake up feeling refreshed, maintain normal cognitive performance, and don't accumulate the sleep debt that most people would experience. Since then, scientists have identified several other genetic mutations linked to what they call natural short sleepers. These individuals make up only a tiny fraction of the population, but they prove something important. There is no single number that every human being is biologically required to sleep. Our sleep needs are written partly in our genes. But even if you aren't one of these rare individuals, your sleep requirements still change throughout your life. Babies can sleep over 16 hours a day. Teenagers often need 8 to 10 hours as their brains rapidly develop. Adults generally require somewhere between 7 and 9, and older adults frequently sleep less, not because they stop needing rest, but because their internal body clock begins shifting earlier, making it harder to stay asleep for long periods. Sleep is not a fixed target. It's constantly adapting to your biology. The same is true from day to day. After intense exercise, illness, emotional stress, or long periods of mental work, your body often demands extra recovery. But on quieter days, it may naturally need less. The mistake many people make is assuming they must hit the exact same number every night, regardless of what their body is actually telling them. That's why many sleep researchers encourage people to pay attention to how they function during the day, rather than obsessing over a specific number on the clock. If you wake up naturally, stay alert without relying on excessive caffeine, maintain stable energy, and don't feel overwhelming fatigue throughout the day, you may already be getting the amount of sleep your body actually needs. Chasing more sleep simply because you've heard 8 hours is the magic number may not provide any additional benefit. But before you decide to start cutting your nights short, there's one final piece of the puzzle. Because although sleeping slightly less can be perfectly healthy for some people, chronic sleep deprivation remains one of the fastest ways to damage both your body and your brain. The challenge isn't figuring out how little sleep you can survive on. It's figuring out how much sleep you actually need. And that's the difference between using sleep as a tool for better health and accidentally turning it into one of your biggest health risks. So, is less sleep actually good for you? The honest answer is sometimes. If you naturally wake up after 7 hours feeling rested, sleeping an extra hour probably won't make you healthier. If you spend long periods lying awake in bed, improving sleep efficiency by reducing time in bed can actually improve your sleep quality. And for a very small number of people with rare genetic traits, 6 hours may genuinely be enough. But that's very different from intentionally depriving yourself of sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation still impairs memory, slows reaction time, weakens the immune system, increases the risk of accidents, and damages long-term health. The real lesson isn't that everyone should sleep less. It's that more sleep is not automatically better. And the idea that every person needs exactly 8 hours every night is far too simplistic. Sleep is highly individual. Your biology, age, lifestyle, stress level, and even your genes all influence how much you need. The goal is not to maximize the number of hours you spend in bed. The goal is to get the amount of high-quality sleep that allows your body and brain to function at their best. Sometimes that might be 8 hours, sometimes it might be 7, and for a few unusual people, it might be even less. The important question isn't, how little sleep can I get away with? It's, how much sleep lets me consistently perform, recover, and feel healthy? Because when it comes to sleep, the number that matters most is not the one recommended for everyone else. It's the one your own body is actually asking for.